Good evening. This is the ECTSS webinar on fostering the culture of DVI innovation with Dr. Cohn and Dr. Kali, and I will hand off the webinar to them at this point. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. As people are joining, I will introduce Dr. Billy Cohn. It's my pleasure to introduce our Eastern Cardiothoracic Surgery Society Research and Innovation speaker for tonight, Dr. Billy Cohn. Dr. Cohn is the Executive Director for the Center of Device Innovation at the Texas Medical Center, or TMC. He's also the CMO of a couple of companies, Bivacor and also Obvious Robotics. He's a professor of surgery at Baylor College of Medicine, where he's been for a long time, and an adjunct professor of bioengineering at Rice University, University of Houston, and Texas A&M. Before joining TMC, he served as the vice president at Johnson & Johnson, executive director for the J&J Center for Device Innovation, and the director of the Center for Technology and Innovation, director of the Cullen Cardiovascular Research Laboratory at the Texas Heart Institute. Dr. Cohn has been deeply involved in developing the continuous flow, totally implantable artificial heart. Remarkably, in 2011, Dr. Cohn and Dr. Bud Frazier successfully implanted the first pulseless total artificial heart device in a human patient. Dr. Cohn has many patents, about 200 US patents, some of them ongoing and pending, and has a lot of foundational intellectual property for 10 different venture-backed medical device startups. I worked with Dr. Cohn when I was an engineering student at the University of Houston, and have watched him take ideas from spark to prototype within a couple of days to the operating room in the preclinical animal models, literally within days. Dr. Cohn, thank you for accepting this invitation, and I look forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you, Hassan. That was a great introduction. And hello, everybody. It's my privilege and honor to get to present to you. I've tried to fashion my career as an innovator, and to be recognized as such by your peers is a great honor and goes right to my head. As you just heard from Hassan, I wear a lot of hats. My main gig now is being the Chief Medical Officer of Bivacor. We think this is the world's first practical, permanent, total artificial heart. That's been my grail quest. But I'm going to talk about the last 25, maybe 27 years of garage-based innovation and kludgy prototypes, and the journey that has taken me to where I am now, and share some of my passion and joy. And hopefully one or two of you listening to this talk today will get the bug and see that the actual first steps to innovating are easier to do than you think they are. There's this whole mythology that it's really complex and difficult. I can tell you the first steps are well within the abilities of everybody listening, and you just have to believe it and do it. Another great topic, title for this talk, fostering a culture of do-it-yourself, DIY, surgeon innovation, would be the power of inelegant, cheaply produced prototypes. And hopefully I can impress you all with the fact that you can do this. You just need to make yourself do it. Another good title for this talk would be The Art of Shameless Self-Promotion. So apologies up front. I'm going to show this slide because I'm really proud of it. This is the work I've done over the last 25 years. These are all conflicts I have. These are companies that I founded or co-founded. These are ones that license my patents. These are ones that I'm going to talk about in this talk. So in the interest of maintaining academic integrity, there's my pseudo disclosure. Here's a summary. I'm severely conflicted with respect to a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about. So I hope you keep the appropriate filters in place. I was so fortunate. I was Michael DeBakey's last chief resident, just an amazing man, indefatigable, brilliant, creative. Here he is, 6 months before he died at 99 years of age, lecturing to medical students. But my favorite photo of him is this. Here he's in his late 50s, sitting at his wife's sewing machine and taking Dacron polyester and sewing it into a tube in anticipation of sewing them in animals and showing you could replace blood vessels with Dacron. He invented the Dacron prosthetic graft. What a monumental achievement. But check it out. He went to a fabric store, found a fabric that wouldn't dissolve, that wouldn't be ingested by the body, sewed it into a tube, and did the experiment. And if you get nothing else from the talk, understand that monumental, impactful initiatives often have a simple first step like this. So leaving that and hearing this story and working with him infected me with the concept that I was going to do that with my career. Once I graduated, I went to Boston to the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. There, I started doing coronary bypass, as a lot of surgeons do when they first finish their training. One thing we were starting to see in the mid-90s is reports from South America about surgeons doing beating heart bypass, off-pump cabbage. It was very new and novel at the time. The South Americans were doing it to save money, avoiding the heart-lung machine, but they started reporting that in some elderly and sick patients, the results were very impressive. So I went to Johns Hopkins. You know, the idea of avoiding a heart-lung machine's not a new one, but with that initiative, a lot of people started looking at it. My friend Jim Fonger was at the Jewish Satellite Hospital at Johns Hopkins, and he had made his own stabilizer. He'd taken a right angle clamp and taken a rubber tubing and put it over the feet so it wouldn't dig into the heart, and then a third piece of tubing to keep the 2 feet apart. And he would go in the OR, and his second assistant would mash down on either side of the artery. Duke Cameron was actually assisting him that day. And he did a single vessel bypass, and we were all very impressed. It looked stressful to do because it was stressful to watch. But he got through the operation. At the end, we were all very congratulatory. And there were 2 other surgeons watching that day. He had a continuous stream of observers. And I said, "Nice job, Dr. Fonger." He said, "Thanks." And I said, "It looks like the guy that's holding the stabilizer has the hardest job. Why don't they make it so it locks in place?" And he said, "Yeah, well, I'm sure someone's working on that." Let me tell you, pearl number 1, when someone says someone's working on that, it's probably you. I went home on the plane and started sketching ways I would make a stabilizer that locked to the sternal spreader. This is before even mid-cab. It looked like a flattened spoon, so I went to the grocery store. I bought spoons. I flattened them out. I drew on them with a Sharpie marker. I cut them out in front of the TV in my apartment in the north end of Boston. We hadn't even bought a house yet. Frank Selke had an animal lab. I'd never done animal surgery. I didn't have a machine shop. I didn't know anything about anything. But Frank said, "Yeah, before we sack the animals, you can try your little stabilizer." I did it over and over again and would iterate the stabilizer, improve it, and got it working pretty well. I then talked to my chief, and he said, "Well, you should try it on a patient." And this was when I was starting to look at mid-cab and seeing somebody do a mid-cab. And I said, "Well, don't I need to go to the FDA?" And he said, "No, there's a long, rich history of people trying tools on patients if they think it's going to give them a better result." These are some of the iterations of my cut up spoon. The way it worked is it would, here on the LAD, I would thread silicone elastic tapes underneath the artery. They would lock in to these little grooves on the side, and the back would clip to the drapes. Here's the first human case. This is a mid-cab. I don't know why that's not playing. Is it playing for you? Probably not. Let's see. Give it a sec. Maybe it's thinking about it. Anyway, yeah, look how motionless it is. Yeah, the video's not playing. But this was the artery. This is the little incision. And over the next several weeks and months, tons of people came to watch me use that device. It became my first successful patent and my first product. Genzyme Surgical bought it and turned it from my cut-up spoon into this nice device. Boy, what if none of my videos are going to play? Hope springs eternal. Maybe it will. Anyway, it was so exciting for me to see this turn into a real device and to get used by people around the world. And I was 34 years old. I was a year and a half out of training. It was so, so exciting for me. Anyway, and it turned into this product. And so at 35, I thought, or 36 years old by this time, 37, I thought, am I a one-hit wonder? Is this the end of my innovation adventure? But thinking back on it now, 25 years later, I've sort of developed a codified program of what to do. And I followed what I had done with that original innovation and realized that it's not only describable, it's teachable. And I call this Medical Device Innovation 101. And I'm going to go through each of these. And this is what I encourage any of you that want to innovate to do. In fact, take a picture of this slide, and I'm going to go through each of these things because some of them may be counterintuitive. The first one may be obvious. Focus on an unmet clinical need in a field you really understand. Emphasis on really understand. If you don't understand the nuances of the field, you might make something that people don't need. Look at Cardica. They did this beautiful anastomotic device, and the world said, we don't care. You've got to really appreciate what the unmet needs are, what the problems are, and what technology we need. And to do that, be an introvert. Study your own belly button. Find the things in the course of the day you don't like doing. For example, things you have to do over and over again, and yet you must maintain concentration. Things that you perseverate about in the operating room because you're worried if you don't do it right, you're going to get a complication because you've had a complication before. The things that you procrastinate on and put off till the next day or the next day because you don't like doing them. If you look at the world through that filter, that's where all the great ideas are. Because if you don't like doing it, or if you're stressed out by doing it, or if you don't think there's a good way to do it, other people that do what you do feel the same way, and innovation can make all the difference. And I have this thing I call the matrix, not Keanu Reeves, but this matrix. And I made this up, and there's a lot of different ones. But when you have an idea that you're getting ready to pack for the journey and try to do, ask yourself these 7 questions. First, it's got to address an unmet need. If it's going to take years and years and tons of money to get through the regulatory hurdles, it better be impactful. Like, for example, an artificial heart. It's got to be something really good. And it can't be super expensive to develop. There's got to be a big market that needs it. So the economics are attractive because you're going to need people to invest in it and pay for it. If there's a lot of people working on the same thing, like with percutaneous valves, God, it's got to be so great to beat the pack. That's something you should consider. It can't require magic or science fiction or time travel. It's got to be something that's actually going to work that you can make. And there's a lot of things being developed simultaneously. You got to make sure you're not going to be obsoleted by any of the other things. Give a score to each one of those. I don't know, 1 to 10. If the total is too big, consider doing something else. We all have limited bandwidth. If you're going to spend time innovating, come up with a underhand pitch of the plate for your first efforts to really sort of learn what's involved before you become too ambitious. Think simplicity. If you have an idea that's really simple and you talk to your partners and they go, I'm sure someone's worked on that, or it can't be that easy, hurry up and patent it. If somebody says, I'm sure someone's tried that before, call your patent attorney that night. Because the best ideas, the most impactful ones, are super simple. Here's a bunch of them. When Grunsig put a balloon in a narrowed lesion and inflated it to open up the first angioplasties, people stood in line to slap him because they said it was such a stupid idea. Well, there are 1 million of them done a year in the United States. When Fogarty came up with balloon embolectomy, William Altemeyer stood up at Grand Round when Jack Cranley presented the first patients and said, only someone as junior as a medical student would not understand why this won't work. Tom Fogarty was a medical student at the time. It's been used in 25 million patients. How many of you, when you saw your first TAVR, thought, oh, what a great idea? Didn't you think there's no way they're going to embolize, they're going to crack the aorta? It's now a multi-billion-dollar business. When I first came up with the idea of connecting arteries and veins with catheters, people said all the reasons it wouldn't work. They'll bleed into their arm, et cetera, et cetera. Were they right or was I? Stand by, I'll get to it in a little bit. Be resourceful when prototyping. There are resources everywhere. There's low-hanging fruit, man, there is fruit on the ground. I talk about prototyping. A lot of you are probably going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not going to prototype. I'm a surgeon. Let me tell you, if you need another hobby, prototyping is a great one. It's fun. You get better at it really quickly, and the fruits of your labor will make you really excited. I know we're all busy. I know you don't know how to make stuff, but if you mess with it, you'll find it maybe become your most favorite thing. And I've turned a lot of surgeons that have never prototyped into active prototypers, and I encourage some of you to make the jump. Plus, if you got an idea, you need to show people. You can't just tell them. That prototype is going to be your pom-poms and being a cheerleader for the thing you're excited about. And since innovation is a team sport, you got to get people to help you. Engineers, business leaders, you got to get people to give you money. If you don't have pom-poms, you'll be a bad cheerleader. The prototype will at least help you show to an engineer who will say, well, why didn't you use this? Why didn't you that? And you say, come on, help me. And you can get the engineer to help you make a better prototype. Super important part of the invention process. As you're making your prototypes, things will occur to you and you'll start over and you'll do it over and over again. And that's part of the inventive process. Use the MacGyver approach. You guys remember MacGyver? This Canadian guy with a mullet haircut who could use things that were readily available in his environment to defuse nuclear warheads and defeat terrorists. If you understand who MacGyver is, then you'll understand that this is medical device prototyping headquarters. On the aisles and shelves of Home Depot are everything you need to make anything you can conceive of. Perhaps it's 10 times larger than the actual device, but even that process of making a big, kludgy, oversized iteration clarifies in your mind how it's going to work. And before you even finish making the first prototype, you'll have it in your mind how to remake it better. And you do that over and over again. You're afraid your prototypes will be too inelegant and people will laugh? Don't show them to anybody. You learn to sing karaoke by singing in the shower. Only once it sounds good do you get on the stage. After you iterate 6 or 7 times, you'll hold something that you're proud of. You'll be holding something that really explains your idea, and then you'll be eager to show it to people, get people to join your Grail quest, and then you've got a team and there's no stopping you. There is everything there, every kind of tube and wire and this and that. An important part about going to Home Depot, though, is you need to open your filters. And let me explain what that means. This is a very real story about the early days of the center heart lariat. For those of you unfamiliar with it, it was something used in the cath lab. It's something that is used in the cath lab to tie off the left atrial appendage in patients with atrial fibrillation without opening the chest or stopping the heart. It can be done under local. I was designing the first prototype of that. I was up late. I was hypercaffeinated, kind of like I am now. And I raced to Home Depot to get there before 10 o'clock when they close. And I found someone in an orange apron. And I said, I need a little plastic tube. And he said, yeah, what for? He was asking, he was trying to help me. He wanted to know what for, so he could tell me where to go in the store. And I said, that's not going to be particularly helpful. And he goes, well, no, I mean, if you tell me what it's used for, I can tell you whether to go to gardening or electrical or housewares or plumbing. And I go, well, it's really none of those things. He said, just tell me what you're going to use it for. And I said, okay, I'm trying to design a device that'll go up through a 1 centimeter cut under the rib cage into the pericardial sac that'll allow you to tie off the left atrial appendage under X-ray and ultrasound without stopping the heart and opening the chest, so patients with atrial fibrillation won't have a stroke. And it was late. They were almost closing. He had a clipboard in his hand. He was checking inventory. He had a bottle of Windex in his right hand because he was cleaning the glass of the cabinets. And he tilts his head, looks at me and says, dude, this is Home Depot. We don't have anything like that. Well, as I mentioned, his right hand hanging down by his hand was a bottle of Windex. And in the Windex was my little tube. So his filters were like this. Is it gardening or is it housewares? If you open your filters, there are resources everywhere. This was the tube that allowed the string to go through so I could pull down like a Ramel tourniquet to tighten the knot. Also, don't get too hung up about the quality of your prototypes. Take action the day it occurs to you. You can make really inelegant prototypes and it will be the first step of the process. They'll get better with time. Don't get too hung up. I showed you these cut up spoons. These are the ones that I'm willing to share of my stabilizer and show. The first 5 were so inelegant, I don't even keep photos of them. They're so bad. Check this out. This is a device that the legendary Tom Fogarty made for attaching grafts to the ascending aorta without having to do a side biter for off pump. It's a little catheter that went into the aorta that opened up into this little spoon, and then a fork that came down on the outside that would isolate this area, and you could sew a graft to it. Here is Tom Fogarty's first prototype. Corn on the cob tongs, a piece of coat hanger wire. If Tom Fogarty is allowed to make prototypes that are that inelegant, I submit that we all are. You just got to get over yourself and just start making stuff. And then really, I can't emphasize enough how important even low resolution prototypes are. Don't underestimate the impact. It can make a difference, and you all have the wherewithal to make it. Here's a great story from my playbook. I was coming up with the idea for the neck stitch. And many of you, I'm sure, haven't heard of this, but it's a product now produced by Teleflex that owns Technitel. And the idea was to make valve implantation faster. For those of you that do valve replacements, you know you use a pack of pledgeted interrupted sutures. Each suture has a needle each end and a pledget. I noticed that when I put in a valve, every other stitch I had to slow down because the spacing between these two had to be very narrow, but I had to make sure I didn't hit one of these with the second one's needle. And timing yourself or any of your peers, you'll notice it takes much more time to put in this second stitch because it requires more precision. I said, well, why don't we take a suture pack and combine every other stitch so each needle has two pieces of string following it. So it's half the needles and the spacing's always perfect because these two stitches that need to be close to each other go through the same hole and you can't accidentally stick one with the other. This occurred to me sort of on the fly. We were at a Genzyme key opinion leaders meeting, and Kevin Akela was there, and Randy Chitwood, Mehmet Oz, and Redmond Burke. It was a room full of big voices. I said, and I didn't have these graphics. I drew it on a dry erase board. I said, look, instead of putting in 24 needles through the tissue and 24 needles through the sewing ring, it's only 13, and the spacing's always perfect. And then one by one, they all got up to the dry erase board and talked about why it wouldn't work, why it would tear tissue, why it would be difficult to do. And at the end of that session, the people at Genzyme that I worked with a lot came and said, don't worry about it, Ace, you can't get them every time. And I said, no, I still stand by it. I think it's a good idea. Shame on me for getting up and talking about it empty-handed with a dry erase marker. I went home to Hobby Lobby the next day, 2 days later, spent about $25 on styrofoam, yarn, and spray paint, and made a demo model of this and the conventional technique and showed why all the concerns they had weren't true. Turned the room. The next month, they were all in support. They brought it to market. This has been on the market for 20 years, and I still get a check every 3 months. Not a big check, but very satisfying that I turned around this whole room of KOLs with a $25 styrofoam model. And by the way, I took this model to the FDA and showed them why it should be a 510K with Julie Swain and Wolf Saperstein and with Randy Chitwood there. And we changed their mind about it being a PMA, and it got 510K clearance. Prototypes, very valuable. You don't have to be brilliant. You don't have to be artistic. You don't have to be skilled. Super easy. Now, to invent, you need a good imagination, a pile of junk. That's a Thomas Edison quote. Here's another pearl. There is free junk everywhere. Every medical device you use that comes in a sterile peel pack that's disposable has an expiration date on it, has nothing to do with what's in the package. It's sterility, it's brittleness of adhesives, it's outgassing of polymers. They throw away so much great stuff. Actually, that's not true. They don't throw it away. They put it in a box. Some of it goes to the third world for hospitals in impoverished areas to re-sterilize and use. Some of it becomes landfill. Find where it goes in your hospital. Call the person who comes and carts it off. Befriend them. Our guy's a guy named Andy Sinsky. Great guy, likes to go deep sea fishing. I take him deep sea fishing. He lets me dig through all the hospitals in the Texas Medical Center's discarded, expired stuff. Here I am with my wife and two of the guys in my lab. We have a $20 or $30 million storehouse of catheters, wires, stents, everything, IVUS probes, all expired, all perfectly good. just, it's out there. You just need to find it and utilize it. Really a great resource. Here's a couple more early prototypes from my playbook. The central heart lariat that I was talking about before. It's done in the cath lab. It's for tying off the left atrial appendage. I decided that John Litticoat, my brother-in-law now, said, this is something we should work on. I came up with an idea. I wanted to demonstrate it. I didn't want to spend the money on an animal. So I came up with a model on my own. I went into my expired parts warehouse and took a Fogarty balloon and mounted a magnet to the end of it with heat shrink tubing. It's so weird that none of my movies are playing. Really disturbing. Anyway, a bronchial blocker with a magnet on the end. Then I made a left atrial appendage. Maybe I can click through, out of a Ziploc bag. When the two magnets came together, that gave me a rail now, because the second catheter, I'm sorry, this catheter here, the second catheter that's coming in comes up under the rib cage in the pericardium. That gave me a rail that I could follow with my piece of string. By the way, this light blue tube was the thing that I took out of the Windex. It would go over the balloon. I then would inflate the balloon and use it as a template. There's the balloon inflated. Then when I pulled the string in the blue tube, it would allow me to tie off the left atrial appendage right at its base. With that inelegant video prototype and that video, I was able to convince a seasoned CEO to join me, Russ Cyber. We were able to raise capital from U.S. venture partner. Russ built a team, hired engineers, and we were purchased by AtriCure in 2019. So exciting to go from a napkin sketch, from a trip to Home Depot, from that Ziploc thing to an acquisition. This is what the device looks like now. Here's the balloon. Here's the magnet that's in the left atrial appendage. Here's the magnet that's in the pericardium. Here comes the string and a gold-plated wire so we can see it on X-ray. Here's an actual procedure. Let's see, I'll do this jerky animation again. There goes the magnet into the left atrial appendage. There's the balloon inflated at the base of the appendage. There's the echo probe, so we know that's true. There, the two magnets have hooked. Here I am Seldingering my string loop next to its gold-plated wire up over the outer magnet, over the inner magnet, beyond the balloon, inflating the balloon so when I tighten it, it doesn't slip off. Tightening the snare, disconnecting the magnet, tightening the string, taking the device out, and there's the patient with no more left atrial appendage. Very satisfying, used in tens of thousands of patients. Here's the one of my fairly recent things. This is the endovascular creation of AV fistulas. You all have sewn AV fistulas. When I was a general surgery resident, I liked to do them a lot because this was as close as I was going to get to doing heart surgery. It was really discouraging for me to sew one that looked beautifully and have the nephrologist call me 6 weeks later and say, that patient I sent to you, he needs a percutaneous access. Your fistula didn't take. It didn't mature. And at first I took it personally, but then I realized that's about par. 50% of them don't mature. Why is that? Well, it has to do with spasm and ischemia and trauma and edema. Well, I also notice around the same time that every once in a while, a patient gets stabbed. This was a young man who got involved in an altercation over a parking space, and somebody stabbed him in the arm. And we didn't know that the knife went through the vein and into the artery because he wasn't bleeding from the stab wound. He was bleeding into his vein. He had a pulse. He had intact sensation. He looked okay. I was working in the ER at the time. I was still a resident. I said, give him a tetanus shot and antibiotics. I said to the young man, don't get in any more knife fights. He said, no, sir. I said, come back if you notice anything weird. He came back a couple months later with a huge vein with a palpable thrill, dramatic blood rushing through here. And a lot of people in the ER said, too bad you're not on dialysis. Well, we looked up. I wasn't working in the ER. I was the chief of red surgery, and I'd come down and seen the patient. I came down, saw him again. I looked in the big book of vascular surgery. It says, you have to take these to the operating room and fix them. They'll never close on their own. And I thought, well, that's weird. the ones I do as a resident close on their own about half the time. I need this guy with a pocket knife to show me his technique. No, really what I thought is there's got to be some way to make a traumatic AV fistula. Well, when I came to Texas Heart, we had this big animal lab, and I said, I'm going to develop this. I went to my expired junk closet. I ordered some magnets online. These catheters that have heat shrink tubing on them have magnets all up and down them, and an electrode here on the red one that's going to go in the artery, and an electrode on the blue one that's going to go in the vein, and rapid exchange tips so they could go over guide wires. I went to the animal lab and put one of these, the red one, into, oh, come on, you're not even going to let me do this. How depressing. Oh, there we go. I put one of them into the artery and one of them into the vein. The magnets click together, and I'm so sorry none of these videos are playing. I've never had that happen before. These two electrodes get aligned when that happens. I hooked one to the grounding pad and one to the radio frequency end of the electrocautery, zapped a hole, and was able to show a connection between the artery and vein. Very, very satisfying. Oh, mate's trying to play. I hate you, computer. I'm going to throw you away after this talk. Sometimes you can scare people into good behavior. With that video that I'm sorry I couldn't share, I was able to get a seasoned medtech executive, Adam Berman, to join me as CEO. We raised capital, we built the company, and after doing, we had to do a de novo clearance. We had to do sort of a IDE. We did 80 patients. We got through the FDA. We got reimbursement. We were bought by Bard, Beck and Dickinson. And I think they're doing like 15 of those a day in the United States now. And Medtronic just bought one of the fast followers, and there are 4 other fast followers chasing that same ball. Here's what the devices look like. They're strong magnets up and down them. And again, these videos won't play, but that's good. It'll make my presentation take less time. We figured out where to put them. Here they are going in to a patient. Imagine them sliding in effortlessly, aligning, the device firing, and getting a beautiful AV fistula. There, I've just told you what this video would have shown. Talk among yourselves. Anyway, let's see if I can even show the fistula. That would be. Oh, there. For a second, you could see it. There, all the veins being filled after an arterial injection. And not surprisingly, because of what we saw with trauma, they matured much faster. This is after only 24 hours. We're able to start dialysis on everybody within a month. Our reintervention rate is 1/7 what it is with surgery. Not everybody's a candidate for it. You got to have a good deep perforator, but a lot of patients have been helped by this. Very exciting. When you come up with an idea and you're starting to prototype, protect your ideas. File a provisional patent. Provisional patents don't cost much money. It's, like $200. Write it yourself. It doesn't have the bar of excellence is pretty low, but it puts a stake in the ground of when you thought of it, so it preserves the date, and it's like a poker ante. Once you spend those $200, you'll feel stupid if you don't pursue it and get a formal patent. So that's to encourage you to continue working on it. Also, it allows you to start talking to people because, as I mentioned, innovation is a team sport. You need people to quit their day jobs or partially quit their day jobs to work hard on the thing that you're passionate about. And you're going to have to show them something and compel them that you really own it. And a provisional patent is one part of that. And also you need to have it patented before anybody's going to invest in it. So in the process of doing your provisional patent, you'll do a search, you'll see what else is out there. You'll understand that your idea really is novel. Your excitement level goes up. The time you're willing to put into it goes up. The fact that you've already paid for a provisional patent means you're not going to give up All those things conspire to push the project forward and help you build the team. You know, open your kimono refers to the Japanese geishas thing about trying to get customers. I am disclosed too much. People say, don't you worry about people stealing your idea. Nobody's really stolen an idea from me ever. I'm worried about not getting enough people together fast enough to get the project live, because you've got a limited time to jump on something before somebody else invents it as well. So I'm pretty manic in sharing what I'm working on to build a team. And to build a team, you need to be a cheerleader. What do cheerleaders do? When do they earn their keep? When the team is way ahead and crushing it? No. When the team is failing. Ooh, I sort of did this out of sequence. But here's what cheerleaders have to do. You got to leverage your experience and what you know about the field, or somebody else that you partner with, to convince others of the merit of what you're working on. You use your prototype. Again, you got to make a prototype. And maybe your prototype is so kludgy, you just use it to convince an engineer to make you a better one. But you use whatever prototype you can get, and your heavy edited video. You see, none of my videos are playing today. The video is key. And you may have to operate a prototype 30 times and edit them all together into one video that makes it look like it really works. And you go, well, isn't that unethical? No, that's the selling process. You're trying to create an image in the mind of the person you're talking to about what it could be. And so if you have to film it 30 times and edit it together to make it look like it works, that's all fair play. You're just trying to capture their imagination. So your heavy edited video, your provisional patent, your prototype, and whoever you've been able to get to join your merry band to get a credible CEO to write a solid business plan. I have never written a business plan. I've looked at tons of them and thrown some away because I didn't like them. I know what a good one looks like, but I always bring in a CEO and have them write the business plan. You kind of go, well, how do you pay for a CEO? And the answer is you give them $0 and 0 cents. They do it because they know if they raise money, if they successfully get someone to write them a check, then they get a big chunk of the company and they get to pay themselves a CEO's salary, and it's off to the races. Everybody in med tech wants their shot at being a CEO, but it's hard to come by. So find someone who's never gotten to be a CEO before, say, this is your chance. They work hard. They write a great business plan. They take all these resources. They go up the East and West Coast. If they can't raise money, you pat them on the hand and say, thanks for trying, kick them to the curb and find a better CEO, because raising money starts the party. If your guy can't, or girl can't raise the money, then they're not compelling enough. Maybe you work on the prototype, make a better video, get some new insight, go back with them or somebody else, try again. Once you raise money, drive it like you stole it. You've got a startup. I mentioned that cheerleaders earn their money when things are going badly. You have to prepare to fail. To have failing on the bench, that's okay. Failing in the animal lab, that's a lot worse because it's much more expensive. It took a lot more resources to get there. Failing in the operating room in Paraguay or Kuala Lumpur or Georgia, those are really dark days. And you have to be able to articulate what went right and why everybody shouldn't totally give up and go find another job. And so you got to be a psychotherapist, you got to be a cheerleader, and you got to really, really believe that that failure is not an indelible blemish on the technology. It was a learning opportunity. Sometimes patients suffer, and that's a hard, hard pill to swallow, but that's part of innovating in medical device. And then perseverance, that's as important as anything else. Here's one from my playbook about perseverance. These two docs came to me because I'd already established myself as an innovator in medical device. They said, we need a better way to start central lines by people who are not skilled in the art. Because late at night, it's an intern, he's overworked or she's overworked. There's limited resources. So we came up with an idea for making a device that would advance a needle with a motor under ultrasound guidance. And I had been prototyping for 15 years now, but 3D printing had just come out. So I had to learn computer-aided design. How many of you on this conference call now have learned to do CAD, computer-aided design? I'm guessing not many of you, but all of you are wizards at PowerPoint. Who taught you PowerPoint? I'm guessing the answer is nobody. You just got it and mess with it, and it's so intuitive. Well, this is even more so. 2 of you, 4 of you, 10 of you, go buy this. It's like $75. In fact, they're free versions, and play with it, and you'll find that you can design anything, all the things you're dreaming of. And now that 3D printers are ubiquitous, they sell them at Home Depot, for God's sake. They sell them at Best Buy. They're going to be everywhere. They're getting cheaper and more functional and faster. With a 3D printer, you can take the things that are in your mind. Oh, this is the least important video, and it's the one that's playing, and make something that'll advance it, that does what you envision, and integrate motors in. And every motor, everything you buy online now comes with the CAD file that you can integrate into your design. So when you make it, it fits right in. This was a handheld image guided thing that had a ultrasound on it and a motor driven needle. It was automated cell dinger. Brilliant idea, I thought. We founded a company. We hired a bad CEO. We put together a marginal business plan. We ran through $3 million and the company shut down. Why? Because I didn't hire the right people. I didn't strongly enough advocate for our vision, and this died as well. But I didn't give up. I just said that was bad execution on my part, partnering with bad people. A project is not dead until you give up. I let it sit on a shelf for 4 or 5 years, and then had the AV fistula was going great, and we just sold Edgecure, and I said, time to revisit this. Why didn't this work? Because as the needle went forward, it would flatten out the vein or push it out of the way. Perseverance. I found this company in Eastern Pennsylvania. They were a veterinary company that had redesigned the needle for accessing blood in lab animals.
First, I'll stick the banana with a standard needle. No added vibration.
Wow, this one's playing. No, just the audio is. Anyway, they figured out that if you take a needle and vibrate it back and forth a 0.5 millimeter, 140 times a second, the needle glides through tissue. Why is that? Well, that's how a mosquito puts its proboscis through your skin. I went out there and watched them and did some experiments, and then came back and made a crude prototype that had this vibrating needle and advanced it through veins. The veins didn't flatten out. They didn't roll. I went back and licensed 11 patents from them and started, again, using CAD, a company that's now called Obvious Robotics. I designed this thing largely on a flight to and from China and 3D printed it to make this device. The device communicates with a monitor, an Apple iPad in this prototype. Anyway, it's a motor-driven, here's the vibration module that vibrates the needle 140 times a second. Here we redesigned the needle so you could put a guide wire in without disconnecting anything. Here's the ultrasound probe that Wi-Fi's both the image and an aiming reticle. Let me see if I can show you some cuts of this. So here, I'm putting it into this glass thing, and here's the ultrasound image. Here's the aiming reticle. As I actuate this, lift it up, you can see the aiming reticle is going deeper and deeper. Here I am in the animal lab, putting the ultrasound on the patient, look for a vein. Device communicates with a monitor. Sorry. The gantry, so the reticle is right in the center of the vein. And we'll push the button. You can see an ultrasound. The needle advances. Advance the guide. There's blood coming out. With that video, now this is a very ambitious prototype. This isn't Home Depot stuff, but if you start playing with CAD, computer-aided design, 3D printing, and understand that you all are heart surgeons and thoracic surgeons, or training to be. You can do stuff that's 10 times harder than what I'm describing. If you can do PowerPoint, you can do computer-aided design, you can make amazing stuff. With that device, I was able to raise top tier money this time. Russ Cyber, who was the CEO of Central Heart after we sold it, is now the CEO of this. Here we are in Paraguay. We went to Paraguay and did 17 patients in 2 days, and it worked beautifully in all of them.
I want to put the ultrasound on patient in the vein. There it is.
So there is the thing. You look at a iPad. There's the iPad showing me the imagery. Here's my aiming target reticle. As I articulate the device, it goes lower and lower. Oops. So here I am going down, aiming for a deep target, now aiming for the vein. When you lock it, it turns green. You then push the button. The needle starts vibrating at 140 times a second, advances all by itself. You're going to see the needle tip right here. And because it's computer controlled, it knew it needed to advance the needle exactly, well, 31.6 millimeters, however much. That's the bevel of the needle, right in the center of the vein. And so the guide wire always goes effortlessly because the end of the needle isn't up against the back wall or the side wall. It's in the middle of the vein. We just got breakthrough designation by the FDA. I'm so proud that I didn't give up on this one. Now, I said I was going to talk for 45 minutes, and I'm only at 37. So I'm going to do one more project, and this is my Grail quest. This is something I've been working on for 20 years that's now on the cusp of realizing some success. And this is the Grail quest to help develop the world's first practical permanent total artificial heart. I showed you that matrix of things. Don't do things that are prohibitively expensive, that take a long time, that have high regulatory hurdles, et cetera, et cetera. This is all of those. If anybody wants advice on innovating, don't try to develop an artificial heart. But this was something that was super important to me for a lot of reasons. I was super lucky because I get to work with this guy. Bud Frazier championed the idea of a rapidly spinning blood pump before anybody thought they had any merit. He demonstrated to the world that the HeartMate 2, that the Jarvik, that the Heartware had merit. He was the first to do all those. We did the GLPs for the HeartMate 3. Bud Frazier has led this charge. And I was up in Boston. I've been up there for 11 years at the BID. Bud said, "Hey, Riley, why don't you come down to Houston and help me redevelop the artificial heart?" I thought, what an adventure. Moved my wife and 5 kids and I back to Houston. We had Reliant LVADs because they were in Houston. We needed adapters. I again went to medical device prototyping headquarters, got drywall tape. This is the stuff you put between drywall. So when you plaster it, there's not a seam there. And this is bath and tile caulk. I went to the fabric store like Dr. DeBakey did when he was making Dacron grafts and bought Dacron polyester. It was $21 for a square yard. This stuff was $6 for a 25-foot roll. This stuff was about $3 a tube. Took the Dacron, sewed it up, put it over a styrofoam cone, C-O-N-E cone, built it up with layers of drywall tape and bath and tile silicone. So it's almost like a piñata, but it was flexible enough that it could accommodate the anatomy. I could cut it to size and the edges wouldn't fray. Needle holes didn't bleed because it went through all that silicone and the drywall mesh. And the inside was beautiful Dacron polyester, stuff that Dr. DeBakey showed us you could put in the blood system. With this, went to the OR on cardiopulmonary bypass, through a thoracotomy in a young calf, cut out the heart, sewed one of these devices to the right atrial remnant, to the back wall of the right atrium, sewed a second one to the left atrium, put a second turbine on, cross them so the left can go to the aorta, the right can go to the pulmonary artery. Here's that animal. And that's one where it's a shame you don't have a video, but here he is walking on a treadmill at a fast clip. There's Denton Cooley, the late great. There's Bud Frazier, who's still going strong. Here's me holding the molasses. So exciting. We did this 68 times with different pumps, HeartMate 3s, Heartwares, Jarvix. The first ones we did were actually Jarvix. And then Bud Frazier said, look, Billy, this is going to be smaller. It's going to use a lot less power and it's going to be durable. Let's try a patient. I don't think I would have been bold enough to do that without Bud Frazier's encouragement and cover. We didn't have to wait long for a patient, but here's the deal. We knew if we threw drywall tape and bath and tile silicone into a patient, we would go to jail and lose our licenses. Luckily, there was stuff on the shelves of Texas Heart Institute and St. Luke's that were approved for implantation. Instead of drywall tape, $6 for a 25-foot roll, we use hernia mesh, $2,000 a sheet. Instead of Dacron polyester from the fabric store, we use Bard cardiovascular patches, about $800 each, and medical silicone from NuSil, and made the world's first continuous flow total artificial heart. HeartMate 2 had been approved in late 2010. This is 2011. We made the world's first twin turbine heart. We did exactly 2 cows with this configuration. They both did fine and then looked for the right patient. We didn't have to wait long. This is a gravely ill patient with systemic amyloid. He had it in his heart, liver, and kidneys. He was on dialysis. He was dying. He had arrested several times. He was being kept alive with a tandem. We took him to the operating room, put the device in. Here he is 2 days later, extubated and awake. You can see how icteric he is. He only went 5 weeks because his liver continued to fail and he couldn't maintain wakefulness. He had great hemodynamics the entire time, but flatline, no pulse. His family, after extensive discussions, asked that we discontinue care, especially because we found amyloid in his lungs. We were hoping we could get him strong enough to tolerate a bone marrow transplant and then a multi-organ transplant. But that wasn't to be. Very tragic, very brave man, very brave family. We got some articles out about it. Bud and I got to do a TED Med talk at Lincoln Center. We got a bunch of lay press. We were in National Geographic. When I was a young boy, I used to read Popular Science religiously. It was the first subscription I got. I'd read all the way through all the ads. So being on the cover of Popular Science for me was particularly impactful. But the most impactful thing is we met this young man who was 37 at the time. He just finished his PhD designing what he thought was the first continuous flow artificial heart. We didn't know about him. He didn't know about us. He came down to show us what he had envisioned. He hadn't made an implantable prototype of it yet, but he had a great vision. He said it would take $2.5 million to bring the team in. We went and got the $2.5 million from a local Houstonian. This is the device. You sew it in just like a heart transplant. It's got one moving part, a double-sided impeller. This is the thing that moves the left blood. These tines move the right blood. Here's a brushless DC motor that makes it spin. These are 3 electromagnets that are adjusting several thousand times a second to keep this floating in an electromagnetic field. So there's no mechanical wear. There are so many features about this device that make it the most sophisticated medical device I've ever been exposed to. But we were able with that $2.5 million to bring his team down. They were all over the world. They were in South America. They were in Aachen, Germany. They were in Brisbane. Daniel's from Brisbane. Here we are putting it in a cow. There's Rich Wampler. Here's the whole Bivacor team, Daniel Timms, Nick Graytrex, Matthias Kleinheier. It takes an army to do this kind of stuff. And here's several videos of our army coming out of the OR. We did 40 or so animals before talking to the FDA. Here's a cow walking on a treadmill with a Bivacor heart in his chest. These animals can exercise. I've seen a calf, a bigger calf than this, walking with this Bivacor heart in his chest with a cardiac output over 20 liters a minute. This is the frozen design. We went to the FDA. We had great interactions through 2023. In November of 2023, they gave us a go-ahead to do our early feasibility study. We picked 9 centers and activated the first 4, Texas Heart Institute, Banner in Phoenix, Christ in Cincinnati, and Duke. We started implanting in July. We've now done 4 implants. The first one was bridge to transplant on post-op day 8. The second one was bridge to transplant on post-op day 10. The third one was bridge to transplant and post-op day 27. These guys all get to be UNOS status 1 because they have biventricular cyst that precludes discharge. We've just applied for permission to do patients 6 through 10. They will be able to go home. They will be UNOS status 2. They'll wait several months for their transplant. We'll get longer term data. But you know what? It is not our ambition to be a great bridge to transplant. It is our ambition to be instead of a transplant. These patients have over 13 liters a minute of flow. Their left atrial and right atrial pressures are single digits. Their GFR doubles in the first day. They've all been extubated right away. They've all been able to kick butt on the 6-minute walk. We have one patient that we did in Cincinnati last week. Today was postoperative day 8. He's walking. He's feeling great. He's probably going to get relisted on Friday or Saturday. So it's amazing for me to see this X-ray of this thing that I've been working on for 20 years. All the rest of this shadow is left and right atrium. There's the Bivacor device. We still have a drive line, but we'll be able to get rid of that. You can if it's carrying compressed air. This device, I think, is not just going to be for patients with severe biventricular failure. I think patients with left heart failure are going to be better served by this device than with an LVAD. And we've got some very compelling data to demonstrate that. Although that X-ray is really cool, this is the coolest. Oops, I guess this video is not going to play either, but that's a video of a guy walking at a brisk pace down the hall with the Bivacor device in his chest. So in conclusion, I know that was a lot of material. I know I'm talking really fast. It even sounds fast to me, but you're all domain masters. You have insights that no one else has. You see the problems every day. You can imagine the solutions. Trust me, the first steps are super easy and every one of you can take them. And after you take the first step, the second step becomes easier. And like training to be a heart surgeon, it's super easy. It's well within the bandwidth, time constraints, and abilities of everybody listening. And most importantly, this isn't a dress rehearsal. This is your life. This is a day in it. If you've had an idea circulating in your head for the last several years, prototype it tomorrow. Surround yourself with clever, inspiring people and do cool stuff. That's all I've got. Hassan, thank you for the opportunity to talk Arn and Arn and Arn. My wife gave me a t-shirt that says, "Help, I'm talking and I can't shut up." And I think this presentation is emblematic of that pathology. So
No,
thanks
this is
for the
great.
opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, this was an amazing, even from, I mean, I've known your work and I was very inspired and impressed. So thank you for joining us tonight. I don't see
Sure.
any questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask you a couple of things. One of the main hurdles, I think, is how to secure the IP. And you talked about the provisional patent, which is pretty easy. But when you want to go on to the next step, which is a lot more expensive, what do you do? What's your advice for people?
If you play it right with that provisional and your prototype and your video, you've compelled a CEO to write a business plan. With that CEO's credibility and their business plan, your cool prototype, your video, and the way you articulate it as a domain master, somebody invests money. The CEO uses that money to prosecute the formal patent. You're out of the equation then. You're just a subject matter expert. It happens invisibly. That snowball is rolling down the mountain at that point, and all the patent strategy, that's up for your CEO to navigate, negotiate, and execute on.
What about you talked about surrounding yourself with a team. As surgeons, most of us have interactions with academicians as well, engineers, etc. But a lot of what we see now is, reps from different companies. What's your suggestion for?
Worthless. I mean, they're great people and they're professionals and they're good at their jobs, but I've never gotten an entry to a company with a rep that made any difference, except with that stabilizer. A rep introduced me to the new people that came in and watched coronary stabilizer being used, and that sort of was important in its genesis. Find a young engineer who's desperate to get into the game. They know everybody's got a Rolodex. And so it's a geometric expansion once you get one person to join. And then, you and that engineer are showing stuff to people, it expands even more. Then once you get to a point where you're impressed with your prototype and you're impressed with the movie you made, and you've got something cool, then you cold call CEOs. How do you find a CEO? Follow the medical news. You get these things from Doximity and stuff about what companies sell. When that company sells, all those med execs are spread to the wind and have to find their next thing. The CEO who sold a company, he is a rare and precious commodity. He's going to get a lot of great opportunities. But the next layer down, the COO, the chief head of marketing, the head of business strategy, what do they want? They want to be a CEO. They want to be a first-time CEO. They will love somebody approaching them and saying, I'm looking for a CEO. They'll be all ears, because that jump from that executive level up to CEO is a very difficult quantum leap. And if you've got something, and you can look on their LinkedIn thing, and they worked as a chief of marketing here, but they were chief of strategy in their previous company, and they were chief of engineering, you go, that guy's got the tickets. So it's all just about leveraging everybody's Rolodexes. Finding the first person is an accelerant if it's the right person. If you hire an engineering student, he goes, no, I don't know anybody. That's the wrong engineering student. You got to pick somebody who's knocking on doors and looking under rocks.
Yeah, no,
I have never paid for a patent.
really.
Paid for a lot of provisionals, but I've never paid for a patent. So, and all of you who are affiliated with academic institutions, your institution will pay for the patent. They'll take a big chunk of your equity and stuff and what you're working on, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about how big your piece of the pizza is. Worry about baking a really big pizza.
What do you keep in your garage now, and what do you suggest for, the fellows and their junior surgeons?
Get a laser welder. No, I mean, it all depends how ambitious you want to be. Really, in the modern world, you need a 3D printer and CAD.
Okay.
And a 3D printer, you can get a killer one for $300. And
Right.
the CAD you can get for free. Learn how to do it. Instead of when you go up to people and say, you could make a thing that does this and that hooks onto that is worth this much. If you have the device and show how it kind of functions, it's worth 10 times that. So I encourage all you young wannabe innovators, go learn to use CAD. You already have access to 3D printers, they're everywhere, but it's so accessible, it's so easy to do.
There's a question from Dr. Curlis. Have you ever partnered with academic or semi-academic institutions?
Yeah, I'm a tenured professor at Baylor College of Medicine. I am an academician. And a lot of the stuff I did, I turned it over, went to technology, did a disclosure with Baylor Ventures. They filed the provisional and had to navigate with them once it turned into a big company. But yeah, all the time. And academic scientists are brilliant. If you have something you can't solve or something that's not quite right, I talk to everybody. Absolutely. In fact, some of them I've even got them to quit academia.
I mean, I witnessed a lot of the weekly meetings between you and the engineer.
Stan Kleiss and what was the other guy's name?
Panchak,
Yeah.
and Ralph Metcalf.
Ralph, it was the best.
Was
Yeah, they taught me hemodynamics. It was a very good learning experience for me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Cohn. Thank you for all the attendees. Thank you for the amazing talk, as always.
Well, thanks, Hassan.
Look forward to.
Sorry I was so long-winded, but hopefully some of you
Hey.
got something out of it.
It was awesome. Thank you very much.